That's incredible. I have to figure out how I can get my husband to do a few more things that he's not doing. Um, one of the things Lee and I talked about over dinner was communication and influencing and persuading. And wondering if you could, because I actually do a PowerPoint presentation called The Art of Communication, which is, for me, effective influencing and persuading. So where are they different and where are they similar?
Well, I always distinguish communications from influencing because communications is basically conveying the message you want to convey, and that and doing it effectively. And there are skills, and I'm sure Terry, you teach those skills on how to convey that message effectively. Influencing is different because, in fact, if you are communicating really well, but you're choosing the wrong message, you will actually not get
Right.
the person to do what you want. You'll actually be encouraging them to do the exact opposite because you're selling them on the wrong things. Influencing requires communication skills, but it's about understanding what the right message is. How do I motivate this person to do what I want them to do and to want to do what I want them to do? Because that's the key. If you understand their motivation, if you understand their you perspective, things happen because they don't just leave. They want to do, they want to work with you because you've tapped into their motivation. So if you're doing a deal with them, usually if you haven't got their you perspective right, if you don't understand how to motivate them, you propose something, they don't like it, they walk away. If you've got their motivation, if you've expressed why they should want to do this deal with you in a way that makes them want to do it or why they should hire you, when things don't work out, they come back to you. They keep working with you because they really want this to happen, and they will keep working with you to make it happen. And that's the real difference between influencing and communicating, because influencing is about getting them to want to help you.
So doesn't it also include, I'm playing a little devil's
Sure.
advocate here, um, the way you communicate to tap into that you perspective can ultimately get you to the influencing part, or no?
No, no, communication is very important, but as I said, they're two separate skills. Communicating, if you know their you perspective, if you've got the right influencing strategy and you can't communicate well with
Ah,
them, it won't work. But if you are a great communicator, if you can give a great speech, you can sell them on it, but you're trying to sell them the wrong thing. You don't have their motivation. It actually is counterproductive. So they're two very important skill sets, but they're very different, and people confuse them. You have to be able to do both.
how would you, using the you perspective, how would you, and maybe there's an example, because
Sure.
how can you tap into getting them to give you what you want ultimately? Is it questions? Is it listening?
Well, absolutely. It's both of those things. I mean, to find out what their you perspective, it's
Right.
about listening, it's about questioning, it's about sometimes reading between the lines because
Ah,
if
yeah.
someone's you perspective is, we'll call it politically incorrect or socially unacceptable, like money, greed, if that's their you perspective, they may not tell you that. Now, if, for instance, and this happens a lot, if you're trying to get somebody to do something at work and it's going to require them to work harder, well, they're never going to say, I don't want to do that because I'm lazy or I don't want to do the work. They'll give you other reasons. So sometimes you have to figure out, okay, the reason that this person isn't doing it is because it's going to add a lot of work. If you understand that's the you perspective, you can present it in a way that doesn't require you take that. Well, I'll do this work. All I need you to do is X, Y. Give them the motivation. Understand what's stopping them, which is actually extra work, and you can get them to do exactly what you want. So, getting their motivation requires listening and asking questions, and sometimes, as I said, reading between the lines, asking the question. If you think you've got their you perspective and their motivations, and they're not doing what you want, and they're not pushing you to want to do the deal, then you got to ask yourself, okay, what am I missing here? Why aren't they doing exactly what I want? That's another way of understanding their motivations. What's stopping them from doing that? Once you get those things, then as I said, that's when you need communications, and that's where some of the convince, collaborate, and create techniques come in, and the effective communication skills. But without that, I've seen many, many very effective communicators. Obviously, at Harvard Law School, there were brilliant orators
Mm.
that I went to school with who weren't really effective because they didn't understand their audience and they didn't understand.
Ah.
They thought I was going
Mm.
to convince you to do something because I
Mm.
was such a brilliant speaker without understanding what you cared about. I'm going to
Mm.
convince you to care about what I care about. Never going to
Ah.
happen.
Mm. Wow, that's a perspective. That's a perspective. Um, and Lee also trains teams.
Absolutely.
How can you give us a little glimpse into how this works in teams, which I think is, or groups of people? It's got to be equally as effective,
Well,
especially with teams.
teams particularly, remember, everybody on the team will have a different you perspective. At
Right.
work, for instance,
Mm.
some people may be motivated by promotion, some people may be motivated by teamwork, some people may be motivated by friendship, some people may be motivated by just wanting to do a good job,
Mm-hmm.
and some people may be motivated by wanting to go home early to their family. If
Mm.
you understand those motivations,
Mm.
you have to work with each individual to make sure they're being satisfied, to pick the right team. Sometimes it's putting together the right team with the
Yeah.
right
That.
combination of skills as
Right.
well as
Mm-hmm.
motivations
Mm-hmm.
that will work together. And then it's about coaching the each individual in ways that will get them to work together again based on their very different
Right.
motivations.
And that would take a lot of influencing and persuading to really
Absolutely.
help people. So, and as you said, picking the right team, you don't always get to pick the right team. You sometimes are with the people that are in the area or in the team. And it's working with many different personalities
And
and
understanding what
understanding,
motivates
right, each
them,
personality.
and understand that they're
Yeah.
each person is different, and that's a mistake we tend to make. We all assume people ultimately see the world the way we do,
Mm.
and very rarely do people see the world the way you do. They each see it in their own slightly different way, some in very different ways.
Mm.
But when you
Yeah.
understand that people are very predictable, and once you understand how what they care about, what they value, and how they see a situation, it's actually not that hard to get them to do what you want them to do. There are tools that you need to use, but the hardest part is listening, questioning, as Terry said, and figuring out what is it that these people care about, what it will motivate them.
And also, Lee told me that he trains globally, so it's not just domestically. And my question is, different cultures, I guess, require different influencing or persuading, or is it basically the same, just getting through the different cultures?
Well, I'm off to Singapore next
I
week to do
know, you're lucky. I'm very
some cross cultural
jealous.
training. I'm jealous too. It's great.
It's a great
I love
city.
training
Mm-hmm.
in Asia and
Mm-hmm.
Europe. But to Terry's question, the techniques are the same,
Mm.
but the cultures are different. Therefore, when I train in China or in Singapore
Mm.
or in Ireland or in
Mm.
Germany, everybody sees the world slightly differently based on their culture.
Right.
And they're motivated differently based on their culture. So you need to understand their culture, but then the same convince, collaborate, create techniques apply. But again, it's getting back to their you perspective, and our you perspective is always influenced by our culture, what countries we come from.
Mm-hmm.
In the United States, what part of the country we come from,
Mm-hmm.
and often, since different corporations or businesses have their own cultures,
Right.
you need to understand the culture of the organization that you're dealing with. Those all affect the motivation and the you perspective of the people you need to influence.
So when you go and work with, when an organization hires you to come and work with them, do you do your own due diligence as to understanding the culture of each of the organizations? As company A and company B and company Z, all different companies, different cultures. How does
Yes,
that work?
you have to understand. You have to understand the culture of the organization you're training in or coaching at. You also
Mm.
need to, within the organization, the sales team is very different from the accountants, who are very
Uh-huh.
different from the human resource
Uh-huh.
people.
Yeah.
So even within a particular culture, there are different aspects of a you perspective
Right.
that are based on your function and your training.
Right. Right. That is true. And going back to that, if you're trying to get everyone to kind of work together, and you've got an HR department that has their own way of being and what their responsibility is, and the sales team, their responsibility, the accounting as their responsibility, do you cross train each of these groups together, or would they be separate trainings for each one?
I do it both ways. When I'm doing cross team training, I very often have them play the role of someone else, and they get a wholly different
Right.
view and understanding of how to work together. I was doing training recently of some consultants, uh, trying to teach them how to ask a current client for more business or to introduce them to other potential clients, and I had them play the role of the client, and it was eye-opening for them to see how it looked from the client's point of view.
And that's what we call in coaching stepping into someone else's perspective.
Right.
So they get a feel for, the other person's or other party's perspective and how they operate.
And that's
So
really gives you a good feel for the you perspective of the people you are selling to, working with, dealing with, negotiating with.
interesting. We have about 2 minutes left. I know it went very quickly. What would you like to impart or say before we wrap up? You have a website
I have a
that,
website, negotiationplus.com. You can see my books. You could purchase them on Amazon. You can get them through the website. And what I'd like to leave the audience with, though, is to understand influencing means to understand the people you seek to influence.
well, we still have some more time,
Okay, well,
believe it or
that's
not.
great.
So I just like to give a little warning just so we don't get cut off. So
Well,
go.
um, as I said, I'll mention my three books again.
Please.
Up, Influence, Power, and the You Perspective, The Art of Getting What You Want. The brand new Woman's Guide to Successful
Yeah.
Negotiating, which I co-authored with my daughter. I love that book, and obviously, I loved
Women's a
working
real
with my
pock.
daughter.
Yeah.
That was great. It's actually one of the best experiences in my life. And for any of you who are thinking about changing jobs or seeking to get a raise, get more money on your next job in any economy.
Well, that's great, and certainly we've got another minute left. It's been very, very eye-opening for me, and certainly hearing what Lee has to talk about. Lee is actually going to be our guest at our ICF meeting this coming Wednesday. And if you want to know any more about it, you can go to our website, which is www.icfnycchapter.org. We're very excited to hear what Lee has to say, and I'm sure our members will as well.
And I'm very excited to be there. And I will be talking about virtual influencing, which is how do we influence when we're not face to
Oh,
face,
that's
via email, via social media, via even the telephone is a virtual influencing tool.
Well, that's also interesting since so much of that is done. I want to thank you for being my guest tonight. It's been a real pleasure.
And thank you for having me, Terry, and thank you all for joining
Well,
us.
thank you. And again, website.
Negotiationplus.com.